I pressed the call button before I even realized what I was doing. My finger shook against the cold glass of my phone screen, and somewhere in the distance, Martin's footsteps echoed across the marble floor, getting closer. The emergency operator's voice crackled through, 911, what's your emergency? My mouth opened, but for a second, nothing came out. On the counter in front of me sat a stack of papers with my name printed across the top in bold letters, Serafina Durrell. Legal documents. Transfer deeds. A living will I'd never signed. And right there, in black ink that seemed to burn through the page, medical directive, do not resuscitate. This is Serafina Durrell, I finally whispered, my voice steadier than my hands. I believe I've just discovered a crime in progress. Against me. The kitchen door creaked behind me. Let me back up. This wasn't how Christmas was supposed to go. That evening started like any other holiday dinner, or at least that's what I tried to tell myself. My daughter Clarice had insisted on hosting this year at her house, this sprawling monument to success that always made me feel small. Crystal wine glasses caught the light from designer garlands. The smell of glazed ham mixed with cinnamon and expensive candles. Everything looked perfect, like a magazine spread. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Clarice moved through her dining room like she owned not just the house but the entire holiday itself. Her husband Martin carved the turkey with practiced precision, his smile wide and charming, though his eyes never quite landed on you when he talked. They slid past, like he was always looking at something just beyond your shoulder. I sat at that table trying to laugh at the right moments, trying to ignore the knot tightening in my stomach. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it. Maybe it was the way Clarice watched me a little too closely when I reached for my wine glass. Maybe it was how Martin kept asking if I was comfortable, if I needed anything, his voice dripping with concern that felt rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, my arms started feeling heavy. Not painful, just weak, like someone had unplugged something vital inside me. My breath came shorter. The lights seemed too bright, then too dim. The room tilted slightly to the left. Mama, are you all right? Clarice's voice cut through the fog in my head. I'm fine, sweetie. Just need some water. I pushed back from the table, waving off Martin's offer to help. My legs felt unsteady, but I made it to the kitchen on my own. The cool air away from the dining room helped clear my head a little. I reached for a glass from the cabinet, turned on the tap, and that's when I saw them. The folders were spread across the counter like someone had been reviewing them during dinner prep and forgot to put them away. Or maybe they hadn't forgotten. Maybe they'd gotten careless. I set down my glass. My hand reached for the top document almost on its own. Property deed. My house. The home I'd shared with my late husband Robert for 32 years. The place where I'd raised Clarice, where I'd buried my grief after Robert passed, where every corner held a memory I wasn't ready to let go of. The paper said it now belonged to Clarice Monroe and Martin Monroe, effective immediately. My pension. Robert's pension that I'd fought the insurance company for months to secure after he died. Transferred. The land my grandmother left me in Tennessee, the 15 acres of woods and creek that I'd planned to visit one more time before I got too old. Gone. Page after page, everything I owned had been signed away. And there, at the bottom of each document, sat my signature. Perfect loops, the way I always made my capital S, the slight hesitation in my R that came from arthritis in my right hand. Except I'd never signed these papers. I'd never even seen them before. My vision blurred. For a moment I thought I might actually be sick right there on Clarice's pristine kitchen floor. Then I saw the last page, and my blood turned to ice water. Medical directive. In the event Serafina Durrell becomes incapacitated, the following wishes should be honored. Do not resuscitate. Do not provide extraordinary life-saving measures. Allow natural death to occur. I must have made a sound, because from the dining room, Martin's voice carried over the soft Christmas music. Everything okay in there, Serafina? My hand shot out and knocked over a glass by the sink. It shattered against the marble counter, pieces scattering like evidence of my presence. That's when I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My daughter's laugh drifted from the other room, light and careless, mixing with Martin's deep chuckle. They had no idea what I'd found. Or maybe they did. Maybe they were in there right now, waiting to see if I'd finally figured it out. The operator was asking me questions. My location, the nature of the emergency, whether I was in immediate danger. "I'm at 2847 Elderwood Drive," I said quietly, my eyes locked on those papers. "I've discovered forged documents. Legal documents transferring my entire estate to my daughter and her husband without my knowledge or consent." "Ma'am, is this a civil matter? Are you currently in danger?" Was I in danger? I looked down at the DNR order again. If something happened to me, if I had a medical emergency, these papers said to let me die. And they'd forged my signature to make sure of it. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I need help." The footsteps behind me stopped. I turned slowly. Martin stood in the kitchen doorway, his hand still resting on the frame, that practiced smile frozen on his face. His eyes dropped to the papers spread across the counter. Then to my phone pressed against my ear. Then back to my face. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, neither of us moved. Then his smile widened, but something had changed in it. Something cold had crept into the edges. "Serafina," he said softly, "what are you doing? Would you have called 911 in that moment? Tell me in the comments below what you would have done if you'd found those papers. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will blow your mind. Trust me, this story is just getting started." The police officer who showed up at Clarice's house that night looked about 12 years old. Maybe he was 25, but to me, standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs, he seemed like a child playing dress-up in a uniform. "Ma'am, can you explain what the emergency is?" I pointed at the papers still spread across the counter. My hand wouldn't stop shaking. "Those documents. They have my signature, but I never signed them. Someone forged my name to steal everything I own." The officer picked up the top page, squinting at it under the kitchen lights. Behind him, Clarice appeared in the doorway, her face painted with perfect concern. Martin stood just behind her, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. "Officer, I'm so sorry you had to come out here on Christmas," Clarice said, her voice sweet as honey. "My mother has been under tremendous stress lately. Ever since Daddy passed, she gets confused sometimes." My stomach dropped. "I am not confused. Mama, please." Clarice stepped closer, reaching for my arm. I jerked away. "You've been forgetting things. Last week you called me twice asking where you'd put your car keys. They were in your purse. That has nothing to do with this." The officer looked between us, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. "Ma'am, these look like standard estate planning documents. Have you recently done any legal work with your daughter?" "No. That's what I'm trying to tell you." Martin cleared his throat. "Officer, if I may. My mother-in-law did ask me to help organize her paperwork a few months ago. She was worried about getting her affairs in order. We had several conversations about updating her will, making sure everything was clear for when," he paused, his face softening with fake sympathy, "for the future." Lies. All lies. But they sounded so reasonable coming out of his mouth. "I never asked for any of this," I said, but my voice cracked. Suddenly I sounded exactly like what they wanted me to sound like, a confused old woman having a breakdown at Christmas dinner. The paramedics checked my blood pressure, asked me questions about my medical history, shined lights in my eyes. Everything came back normal except for elevated stress levels. Of course, I was stressed. I'd just discovered my own daughter was trying to rob me blind. "Mrs. Durrell," the older paramedic said gently, "is there anyone we can call for you? Another family member maybe?" I almost laughed. Clarice was my only child. Robert was gone. His brother lived in Oregon and we hadn't spoken in years. I had friends, sure, but nobody I could call at 10 o'clock on Christmas night to say my daughter was stealing my life. "No," I whispered. "There's no one." By the time they all left, it was past midnight. Clarice insisted on driving me home, and I was too tired to argue. We sat in silence the whole way, the Christmas lights blurring past my window like distant stars I couldn't reach. At my front door, she finally spoke. "Mama, I think we need to talk about your living situation. This house is too much for you to handle alone." I turned to look at her. In the porch light, she looked so much like me at her age it hurt. Same dark eyes, same stubborn chin. When had she learned to lie so easily? "Good night, Clarice." Inside, I locked the door and slid down against it until I was sitting on the floor of my own hallway. The house pressed in around me, every corner suddenly feeling empty. The grandfather clock Robert's father had given us ticked in the living room. Somewhere a pipe creaked. These were the sounds of my life, and someone wanted to take them away. Have you ever felt completely alone even when you're surrounded by people who should love you? Drop a comment if you know what that feels like. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes before I could get up. When I finally made it to my bedroom, I noticed something wrong immediately. My desk drawers weren't quite closed all the way. The stack of mail I'd left on top was rearranged. Someone had been in my house. Recently. I pulled open the top drawer where I kept important papers. My hands were steadier now, fueled by something sharper than fear. My insurance documents were there. My car title. But the envelope I'd filed last month, the one with copies of my actual will, the one I'd made with a lawyer downtown 3 years ago, was gone. The next morning, Clarice called. "Good morning, Mama. I wanted to check on you after last night's excitement." I stared at the empty spot in my drawer where the envelope should have been. "I'm fine." "That's good. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we updated some of your paperwork. Your will is probably outdated, and we should make sure everything is in order. You know, just in case." My blood turned cold. "In case of what, Clarice?" "Oh, Mama, don't be dramatic. I just mean for the future. I could come by this week and we could go through everything together." Through the phone, I heard Martin's voice in the background, too quiet to make out the words. "I'll think about it," I said. "Perfect. Oh, and Mama? About those papers you saw last night. I really think you misunderstood what they were. But if you're worried, we can sit down with our lawyer and he can explain everything. Would that make you feel better?" "Their lawyer. Not mine. Theirs. I have to go, Clarice." I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from rage. That afternoon, I went to my filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. The metal drawer screeched as I pulled it open. Inside were years of papers, tax returns, medical records, mortgage documents from the house Robert and I had finally paid off 2 years before he died. And there, wedged between folders, was a manila envelope I didn't recognize. I pulled it out slowly. Inside were papers covered in handwriting that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost, but not quite. Practice signatures, dozens of them, covering loose sheets of notebook paper. Some had notes in the margins in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Too shaky, needs more pressure, redo the capital D." They'd been practicing my signature. And they'd hidden the evidence in my own house. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those practice signatures scrawled across notebook paper like some kind of twisted homework assignment. Too shaky. Needs more pressure. They'd studied my handwriting the way a forger studies art before making a fake. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I got dressed properly, not just throwing on whatever was closest, and I made myself breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and toast and coffee strong enough to clear the fog that had been sitting in my head since Christmas. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a fresh notebook and I started writing. Not a diary. Not complaints or feelings. Facts. Cold, hard facts that couldn't be argued with or gaslit away. October 15th. Martin offered to organize my financial paperwork. Said his firm had a system that would make everything easier. I said no thank you. November 3rd. Clarice asked about my will during Sunday phone call. Asked who the executor was. Asked if I'd updated it since Daddy died. November 20th. Found my file cabinet unlocked. I always lock it. Always. The memories came flooding back once I started looking for them. Little moments I'd brushed off as nothing, little questions that seemed casual at the time. Now they formed a pattern, like stars connecting into a constellation I should have seen months ago. December 10th. Martin's cologne in my office. Distinct smell, like cedar and something chemical. I'd been at the grocery store. December 18th. Clarice had a key made in case of emergencies. I didn't ask for it. She just showed up with a copy. Each entry brought back more details. The way Clarice's hand had hovered over my checkbook when I was signing a payment. The too quick explanation Martin gave when I caught him near my desk. The emails from my account that I didn't remember sending, mostly to their lawyer about updating estate plans. I wrote for 3 hours straight. My hand cramped, but I didn't stop. This notebook was becoming something they couldn't take from me. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind, that I was paying attention, that I remembered. By noon, I had 6 pages filled front and back. It wasn't enough to take to court, probably, but it was enough to make me trust myself again. That's when I noticed something else. On my desk, near where I kept my laptop, the wood had faint scratches I'd never seen before. Like someone had pried something open. I ran my finger along the groove, then checked the drawer underneath. My backup checkbook was missing. The one I kept for emergencies, with my account number printed right on every check. Have you ever realized someone you trusted had access to everything in your life? It's not just scary, it's violating. If this story is hitting close to home, you're not alone. I grabbed my phone and called my bank. The woman who answered had a cheerful voice that made me want to scream. First National, this is Deborah, how can I help you today? I need to check recent activity on my checking account. All transactions from the last 60 days. Of course, ma'am. Can I get your account number? I rattled it off from memory, along with my social security number and mother's maiden name and whatever else they needed to verify I was actually me and not someone pretending to be me, which was ironic given the circumstances. All right, Mrs. Durrell, I'm pulling that up now. Let's see. You've had pretty standard activity. Grocery stores, utility payments, your usual pharmacy. Anything unusual? Any large checks? A pause. There is one check that cleared on December 20th for $1,500 made out to Morrison Legal Associates. Is that familiar? Morrison Legal Associates. Martin's firm. No, I said quietly. That's not familiar at all. Would you like to dispute the charge? Yes. And I need to put a freeze on my account. Immediately. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. $1,500 to Martin's law firm. For what? Forging documents? Planning my erasure? Getting legal advice on how to steal from an old woman without getting caught? My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, cold, focused. I opened my laptop and started searching. What to do if someone forged your signature? How to prove document forgery? Elder financial abuse lawyers near me. The articles that came up were horrifying. Apparently this happened all the time. Family members stealing from elderly parents, forging wills, draining bank accounts. One article said that financial exploitation of seniors was a $20 billion problem. 20 billion. I was just one more number in that statistic. But there was hope too. Forensic document examiners who could prove forgery. Lawyers who specialized in elder law. Protective orders and emergency injunctions. Ways to fight back if you knew what you were doing. I bookmarked 17 different pages. Printed out 5 articles. Made notes in the margins with a red pen. That evening, Clarice called again. "Mama, I haven't heard from you all day. Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You sound different." "Do I?" A pause. I could practically hear her trying to figure out what had changed in my voice. "Martin and I would really like to come by this week. We're worried about you." "I'm busy this week." "Doing what?" The question came out sharper than she probably intended. There it was, the real question underneath. What could I possibly be doing that was more important than letting them into my house to continue whatever they'd been planning? "Research," I said. "I'm doing research." "Research on what?" "Different things. Legal things mostly." Another pause, longer this time. "Mama, you're not still upset about Christmas, are you? I told you, those papers were just drafts. Martin was helping me understand estate planning. Nothing was finalized." "Of course not, sweetie. I'm just educating myself." "Is that a problem?" "No, of course not. I just..." She trailed off. In the background, I heard Martin ask something. "Listen, Mama, we'll talk later, okay? Love you." She hung up before I could respond. I looked down at my notebook, at the pages of evidence I'd been building. Then at the practice signatures still sitting in their envelope on my table. Then at my laptop screen, open to an article about forensic handwriting analysis. They thought I was too old, too tired, too trusting to fight back. They were wrong. The next morning, I drove to the public library downtown. I hadn't been there in years. Usually I just ordered books online or didn't read at all. But the library had something I needed: free computers and privacy and information that wouldn't show up in my browsing history at home. I settled into a corner desk and pulled up everything I could find about forged wills and financial elder abuse. An hour passed. Then 2. My neck ached from staring at the screen, but I kept going. That's when someone tapped my shoulder. I jumped so hard my knee hit the underside of the library desk. Papers scattered across the floor. Printouts I'd been making about document forgery and estate fraud. A woman around my age bent down to help me gather them, her movements quick and efficient. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to startle you. It's just, I saw what you were researching and I couldn't help but notice." My face went hot. I grabbed the papers from her hand, maybe a little too roughly. "It's fine. Thank you." "Wait." She put her hand gently on my arm. Her eyes were sharp but kind, the kind of eyes that had seen things and remembered them. "My name is Camille Overton. I used to be a paralegal before I retired. And unless I'm completely off base here, you're in some kind of legal trouble." I should have walked away. Should have told her to mind her business. Instead, I burst into tears right there in the middle of the public library. Camille didn't act shocked or uncomfortable. She just handed me tissues from her purse and waited while I pulled myself together. When I could finally breathe again, she gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Tell me what's happening." So I did. I told her about Christmas dinner and the forged documents and the practice signatures hidden in my house. About the missing will and the $1,500 check to Martin's law firm. About feeling crazy and alone and erased. She listened without interrupting, her face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, she leaned back and let out a long breath. "How confident are you that those signatures are forged?" "Completely. I never signed those papers. I'd remember." "Good. Because you're going to need that certainty for what comes next." She pulled a small notebook from her purse, not much different from mine, and started writing. "First thing, you need a forensic document examiner. Someone who can prove those signatures are fake using science, not just your word against theirs." "Where do I find someone like that?" "I know someone. But you're also going to need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, someone who specializes in elder law and isn't afraid to fight dirty when necessary." My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Actual, real hope. "I know someone for that too," Camille continued. "His name is Alaric Boone. He doesn't take many cases anymore, but when he does, he goes for blood. If you're serious about fighting this, he's who you call." "I'm serious." She looked at me for a long moment, measuring something in my face. Then she nodded. "Okay. But I need to warn you about something. When you expose family for doing something like this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your daughter will never be the same. Maybe it'll be nothing at all. You need to decide if you can live with that." I thought about Clarice at Christmas dinner, laughing while my forged DNR order sat in the kitchen. About Martin carving turkey like he was carving up my future. About the way my own daughter had looked at me when the police came, like I was a problem to be managed instead of her mother. "I can live with it," I said. "If someone in your family betrayed you like this, could you forgive them? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed because what happens next will shock you." Camille wrote down 2 phone numbers and handed them to me. "Call Boone first thing Monday morning. Tell him I sent you. In the meantime, don't sign anything, don't agree to any meetings with your daughter or her husband, and for God's sake, don't let them into your house. They have a key. Change your locks. Today." I drove straight to the hardware store after leaving the library. The locksmith they recommended could come out that afternoon, so I waited in my car in the parking lot, watching people come and go with their normal problems. A teenager struggling with bags of mulch. A couple arguing about what color to paint their bathroom. Simple problems. Fixable problems. Mine felt like staring into a canyon with no bottom. By 3 o'clock, I had new locks on both doors. The locksmith was a young guy with kind eyes who didn't ask questions about why a woman my age was changing locks on a Friday afternoon. He just did the work, tested both keys twice, and handed me 2 copies. "You're all set, ma'am. Nobody's getting in here without these." After he left, I stood in my living room holding those new keys, feeling something shift inside me. This was my house. My home. The place Robert and I built a life together. They weren't taking it without a fight. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Camille said. When you expose family, there's no going back. Part of me wondered if I should just let it go. Let Clarice have the house and the money and the land. What did I need it all for anyway? I was 63 years old. No husband, no grandchildren, no real plans for the future beyond watering plants and watching game shows. But then I remembered those practice signatures. Too shaky. Needs more pressure. The cold calculation in that. The time they'd spent learning to fake my handwriting so they could steal from me while I was still breathing. And the DNR order. That's what I couldn't get past. If something happened to me, they'd written instructions to let me die. My own daughter had forged my name on paperwork that said I wasn't worth saving. I pulled out my notebook and added another entry. January 4th. Changed locks. Clarice and Martin no longer have access to my house. Called locksmith. New keys made. I am taking back control. Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I called the number Camille gave me. Boone Legal Services. The voice was professional but warm. My name is Serafina Durrell. Camille Overton gave me this number. I need to speak with Mr. Boone about a case involving forged documents and estate fraud. One moment, please. Classical music played while I waited. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if he said no? What if he thought I was just another confused old woman making accusations? This is Alaric Boone. His voice was deep and measured, the kind of voice that didn't waste words. I took a breath and started from the beginning. Christmas dinner. The documents. The practice signatures. The missing will. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making a small sound that told me he was still there, still paying attention. When I finished, there was a long pause. Mrs. Durrell, can you come to my office this afternoon? Say, 2 o'clock? And bring everything you found, the forged documents, the practice signatures, your notebook, bank statements, anything related to this. Yes. Yes, I can do that. Good. One more question before you come in. What do you want out of this? Quiet settlement where you get your assets back and everyone moves on? Or do you want this exposed? I thought about Martin's smile as he carved that turkey. About Clarice calling me confused in front of the police. About years of being alone and thinking that was my biggest fear, not realizing someone could make you feel even more alone while standing right next to you. Exposed, I said. I want it exposed. For the first time in our conversation, I heard something that might have been a smile in his voice. Then we'll get along just fine. See you at 2. Alaric Boone's office wasn't what I expected. No fancy downtown building or mahogany furniture. Just a small suite above a coffee shop, with filing cabinets lining every wall and papers stacked in organized chaos across his desk. The man himself was maybe 70, with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a cardigan that had seen better days. He looked like somebody's grandfather. But when he shook my hand, his grip was firm, and his eyes were the sharpest thing I'd seen in months. Mrs. Durrell. Sit. Show me what you brought. I spread everything across his desk like laying out evidence at a crime scene. The forged transfer documents. The practice signatures with their cruel little notes. My notebook filled with dates and details. Bank statements showing the unauthorized check. Photos I'd taken of my disturbed file cabinets. Boone didn't touch anything at first. He just leaned back in his chair and studied it all, his fingers steepled under his chin. After what felt like an hour but was probably 5 minutes, he picked up one of the practice signature sheets. They got sloppy here. See this? He pointed to a note in the margin. That's not your handwriting, obviously. It's evidence of intent. Premeditation. They weren't just making a mistake, they were planning fraud. Can you prove the signatures are fake? Not me personally, but I know someone who can. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the desk. Dr. Helena Price. Best forensic document examiner in the state. She'll analyze the ink, the paper, the pressure patterns, even the microscopic hesitation marks that show up when someone's copying rather than signing naturally. How long does that take? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But we're not waiting around doing nothing while she works. He opened a laptop that looked as ancient as everything else in his office. We're going to file for an emergency injunction today. A temporary freeze on all your assets so nothing can be transferred while we build the case. My stomach flipped. Won't that tip them off? Mrs. Durrell, they already know something's wrong. You changed your locks. You haven't answered your daughter's calls. They're not stupid, they know you're onto them. The question is whether we move fast enough to protect what's yours before they try something desperate. What kind of desperate? He looked at me over his glasses. The kind where they try to have you declared mentally incompetent. The kind where suddenly you're the problem, not them. I've seen it before. Family member starts making noise about elder abuse, and suddenly there's a petition to appoint a guardian. Once they control you legally, the money is easy. My hands went cold. Can they do that? They can try. But it's harder if we're already in court showing a pattern of fraud. Judges don't like it when someone commits forgery and then tries to claim their victim is mentally unfit. He started typing something on his laptop, his fingers surprisingly quick. I'm drafting the injunction request now. We'll file it by end of business today. What do I need to do? Nothing yet. Let me handle the legal machinery. But I need you to do something else, something harder. He stopped typing and looked at me. I need you to document everything from here on out. Every phone call from your daughter, every text message, every time they show up at your house. Write down what was said, when it happened, who was there. The more evidence we have of their behavior after you discovered the fraud, the better. I thought of my notebook, already filling up with entries. I can do that. Good. One more thing. He pulled out a phone. A flip phone, the kind nobody used anymore. This is a burner. Use it to call me if you need to reach me and you think they might be monitoring your regular phone. You think they're monitoring my phone? I think they stole $1,500 from your bank account and forged legal documents transferring your house. I think they're capable of anything, and I'd rather be paranoid than wrong. He handed me the flip phone. It felt heavy in my palm, like a weapon. That night, I sat in my kitchen rereading everything in my notebook, adding new entries about the meeting with Boone, about the forensic examiner, about the injunction being filed. The paper trail was growing, getting stronger. Around 8 o'clock, my regular phone rang. Clarice. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello. Mama, finally. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Where have you been? Around. Running errands. What kind of errands? There it was again, that sharp edge under the sweetness. The real question, what are you doing that I don't know about? Just errands, Clarice. Bank stuff. Shopping. I tried calling you yesterday and your phone went straight to voicemail for hours. Because I turned it off while I was at Boone's office. But I didn't say that. Battery died. You know how these phones are. A pause. Martin and I are planning to come by tomorrow. We need to talk about some things. What things? Just things. Family things. We'll be there around 10. I'm not available tomorrow. Mama, this is important. So are my plans. I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to figure out how to respond. The old me would have backed down, would have said fine, come over, whatever you need. But something had shifted. Maybe it was having Boone in my corner. Maybe it was finally trusting my own instincts. We really need to see you, Clarice said, her voice going softer. I'm worried about you. You're not acting like yourself. I'm acting exactly like myself. Maybe you just never noticed before. Another long pause. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Listen, I need to go. I'll call you when I have time to talk. Mama. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Power, maybe. Or just the simple act of saying no to someone who'd gotten used to hearing yes. 20 minutes later, a text came through. We're coming by tomorrow whether you're available or not. We have things to discuss and we're not leaving until we talk. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I called Boone on the burner phone. They're planning to show up at my house tomorrow, I said when he answered. They said they're not leaving until we talk. Don't let them in. You changed the locks, right? Yes. Then keep your doors locked and don't answer. If they refuse to leave, call the police for trespassing. And Mrs. Durrell? Record everything. If you have a video camera or even just your phone, record any interaction you have with them. We might need it. After hanging up, I checked every lock twice. Front door, back door, windows. All secure. My house had never felt more like a fortress. But fortresses can be sieges too. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Car doors slamming in the neighborhood. Branches scraping against windows. The settling of old pipes. Each noise could have been them coming early, trying to catch me off guard. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made tea I didn't drink. Sat at my kitchen table with my notebook open to a blank page, pen in hand, waiting to document whatever came next. In the margin, I wrote, January 8th, they're coming tomorrow. I'm ready. But was I? Could anyone ever really be ready to face down their own child and admit that the love they thought was real had been replaced by something cold and calculated? I touched the burner phone in my pocket. Felt the weight of my regular phone on the table. 2 phones. 2 versions of my life. One before I knew what was happening, and one after. Outside, the sky started turning gray with early morning light. In a few hours, Clarice and Martin would show up at my door. And for the first time in my life, I was going to keep that door locked. What would you do if your own family showed up demanding to be let in after betraying you? Would you face them or hide? Tell me in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 6 is going to change everything. They showed up at exactly 10 o'clock. I watched from my bedroom window as Martin's black Mercedes pulled into my driveway, the morning sun glinting off its polished hood. Clarice got out first, wearing a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Martin followed, carrying a leather briefcase like he was coming to a business meeting. I stayed upstairs. Let them knock. The first knock was polite. 3 taps, then Clarice's voice, Mama? We're here. Open up. I didn't move. Just stood there by the window, my phone in one hand already recording, the way Boone had told me to. The second knock was harder. Mama, we know you're home. Your car's in the driveway. We just want to talk. Martin's voice joined in, smoother. Serafina, please. We're worried about you. Just let us in for a few minutes. I watched them through the curtain. Clarice tried the doorknob, locked. She stepped back and looked up at the windows. For a second, I thought she saw me, but I'd already moved behind the curtain's edge. She changed the locks, Martin said, loud enough for me to hear. I told you she changed the locks. Why would she change the locks? Clarice's voice was rising, losing that sugar coating. Unless someone told her to. Mama, did someone tell you to keep us out? Are you talking to a lawyer? I almost laughed. They were so sure of themselves, so certain they could still control this. The knocking got louder. More insistent. Clarice called my phone. I could hear it ringing downstairs on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. I didn't answer. On the burner phone, I texted Boone, they're here. Won't leave. Getting aggressive. His response came immediately, don't engage. If they don't leave in 10 minutes, call police. I set a timer on my watch. 10 minutes. Clarice was pacing now, her heels clicking on my front porch. This is ridiculous. Mama, we're not leaving until you talk to us. We can stand out here all day if we have to. Martin tried the back door. I heard him rattling the knob, testing it. Also locked. Good. She's being completely unreasonable, Clarice said, her voice sharp now, the mask slipping. After everything we've done for her. Everything they'd done for me. Like forging my signature? Like stealing $1,500? Like writing a DNR order in my name? 8 minutes left. Martin's phone rang. He answered it, walking a few steps away, but I could still hear fragments. No, she won't. I know. We'll figure it out. The injunction is temporary, we can fight it. The injunction. So they knew. Boone had filed it yesterday and they'd already been notified. That's why they were here, desperate and aggressive. Their plan was falling apart. 5 minutes. Fine, Clarice said loudly. If you won't open the door, then listen to me from out here. We know you filed some kind of legal action against us. We know you're accusing us of forging documents. Mama, that's insane. Those papers were drafts. Martin was helping me understand estate planning for when, she paused, for the future. You're making a huge mistake and embarrassing this entire family. 3 minutes. We could have you declared incompetent, Martin called out. We've documented your confusion, your memory problems. We have witnesses who'll testify you're not capable of managing your own affairs anymore. There it was. The threat Boone had warned me about. Timer went off. I called 911. This is Serafina Durrell at 428 Oak Street. I have 2 people on my property who refuse to leave. They're banging on my doors and threatening me. I need an officer here, please. The dispatcher was calm and professional. Are you in immediate danger? I don't know. They're my daughter and her husband, but they're very aggressive and I'm scared. Officers are on the way. Stay inside and keep your doors locked. 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. The same young officer from Christmas night got out, and I saw recognition cross his face when he saw Clarice. This wasn't going to go well. But then a second car arrived. An older officer, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, joined him. She looked at the scene, Clarice in her expensive blazer, Martin with his briefcase, me watching from the window, and something shifted in her expression. I couldn't hear what they said, but I watched Clarice's face go from confident to confused to angry. Martin kept gesturing at my house, at his briefcase, probably trying to explain about my confusion and their concern. The female officer shook her head, pointed at their car, said something firm. They left. Finally. But before getting in the Mercedes, Clarice looked up at my window one more time. Even from that distance, I could see the fury in her eyes. Was this the moment your parent became your enemy? Drop a comment if you've experienced family betrayal like this. That afternoon, Boone called. The injunction was granted. All your assets are frozen. They can't touch anything, not your house, not your accounts, not the Tennessee land, until this case is resolved. I sat down hard on my couch. How long will that take? Depends. If they fight it, could be months. But here's the thing. Dr. Price already started analyzing those documents you brought in. She's fast when she wants to be, and she wants to be fast on this one. Said something about the forgeries offending her professional sensibilities. He chuckled. She'll have preliminary results in a week. What happens then? Then we have proof. Scientific, undeniable proof. And that changes everything. After hanging up, I sat in my living room as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. The same light that had been here yesterday, last week, last year. But everything else had changed. I wasn't the confused old woman they wanted me to be. I was someone fighting back. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're making a terrible mistake. Family should protect family, not destroy each other. Think about what you're doing. I showed it to Boone that evening. He added it to the case file as evidence of harassment. Everything was evidence now. Every text, every threat, every moment of their desperation. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because the danger was over, it wasn't, but because for the first time, I wasn't facing it alone. Outside, a car drove past slowly. Too slowly. I got up and looked out, but it was already gone, taillights disappearing around the corner. Maybe nothing. Maybe them. Either way, I was ready. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Certified mail, requiring my signature, delivered by a postal worker who looked bored with the drama she was probably carrying. I signed for it and waited until she left before opening it. Petition for guardianship. In the matter of Serafina Durrell, alleged incapacitated person. My hands went numb. There it was, exactly what Boone had warned about. 10 pages of legal language saying I was too confused, too forgetful, too incompetent to handle my own life. That I needed a guardian appointed to make decisions for me. That guardian would be, of course, Clarice Monroe. They'd attached evidence. Statements from their friends about how I'd seemed disoriented at Christmas dinner. A letter from Martin claiming I'd asked him repeatedly to help organize my finances because I couldn't remember where I'd put important documents. Even a statement from a doctor I'd seen once for a checkup, taken out of context, suggesting I'd complained about memory issues. All lies. Or half-truths twisted into weapons. I called Boone immediately. He answered on the first ring. They filed for guardianship, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know. I got served this morning. They're moving fast, which means they're scared. The injunction has them trapped and they're trying a different angle. Can they win? Not if we're smart. But Serafina, I need to warn you, guardianship hearings can get ugly. They're going to put you on the stand and ask you questions designed to make you look confused. They'll bring up every time you forgot where you put your keys or missed a doctor's appointment. They'll paint a picture of someone who's declining. But I'm not declining. I'm 63 years old, not 93. I pay my bills, drive my car, take care of my house. I know that. And we're going to prove it. But you need to be prepared for how personal this gets. That night, I couldn't eat dinner. Just sat at my kitchen table staring at that petition, reading the lies over and over. Each one stung worse than the last. The phone rang. Not my cell phone, the house phone, the one I barely used anymore. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Mama. Clarice's voice was different now. Not sweet, not fake. Just tired. We need to talk. Really talk, not through lawyers. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. Just 5 minutes. I'll come alone. No Martin. Just you and me. Every instinct screamed not to trust her. But somewhere deep down, a tiny part of me, the part that remembered raising this woman, teaching her to ride a bike, holding her when she cried, wanted to believe this was real. 5 minutes, I said. On my porch. You don't come inside. She arrived 20 minutes later, alone like she'd promised. Through the window, I watched her get out of her car, no designer blazer this time. Just jeans and a sweater. She looked smaller somehow. Younger. I opened the front door, but left the screen door locked between us. Hi, Mama. 5 minutes, Clarice. She took a breath. I want to explain about those documents. They weren't what you thought. Martin's firm was helping me set up a trust for your assets, to protect them in case you ever needed nursing care. We weren't trying to steal anything, we were trying to plan ahead. With forged signatures? They weren't forged. You signed those papers, Mama. Back in November, when you came to our house for dinner. You were tired and maybe you don't remember, but you did sign them. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. And if I hadn't found those practice signatures, if I hadn't seen the notes in the margins, too shaky, needs more pressure, I might have believed her. What about the DNR order? She flinched. That was a mistake. Martin's assistant included the wrong form in the packet. We were going to fix it. What about the $1,500 taken from my account? That was a retainer fee for the legal work. You authorized it. Lie after lie after lie, each one delivered with perfect sincerity. This was who my daughter had become. Or maybe this was who she'd always been and I'd just refused to see it. Your 5 minutes are up, I said. Mama, please. Drop this legal action and we can all move forward. Family shouldn't fight like this. You're right. Family shouldn't. They also shouldn't forge documents and steal money and write DNR orders. Her expression hardened. Fine. Then we'll see you in court. And Mama? When the judge appoints me as your guardian, when you have to ask my permission to spend your own money or make your own decisions, remember that you chose this. She walked back to her car without looking back. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The burner phone buzzed. Boone, how'd it go? Me, she tried to get me to drop the case. Made threats about the guardianship hearing. Boone, record it? I looked down at my regular phone, still recording in my pocket like he taught me. Me, every word. Boone, good. We'll add it to the file. And Serafina? I got the preliminary results from Dr. Price. Those signatures are definitely forged. Multiple indicators, ink age doesn't match document dates, pressure patterns inconsistent, microscopic hesitation marks. She can testify to all of it. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, phone clutched in my hand. We had proof. Scientific, undeniable proof. But somehow, that didn't make me feel better. It just made it real. My daughter had actually done this. There was no explaining it away, no misunderstanding. She and Martin had planned to erase me from my own life. Have you ever had to accept something about someone you love that changed everything? Let me know in the comments. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks away. Boone filed a response with Dr. Price's preliminary findings attached, arguing that the petition was filed in bad faith by people actively committing fraud against me. Meanwhile, I started doing what Boone called competency prep. He'd send me lists of questions they might ask. What year is it? Who's the president? Can you name your medications? How do you manage your finances? And I'd practice answering clearly and confidently. It felt humiliating at first, like taking a test to prove I was human. But Boone explained that guardianship courts see real cases of decline all the time. We needed to show I was sharp, aware, capable. 1 week before the hearing, Martin showed up at my door. Not with Clarice this time. Just him. Serafina, we need to talk. Man to man, so to speak. I don't think so. Please. This is important. It's about Clarice. Something in his tone made me pause. I opened the screen door but stayed in the doorway, phone recording in my pocket. What about Clarice? He ran his hand through his hair, and for the first time, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. This whole legal thing is destroying her. She's not sleeping, barely eating. She's talking about, I'm worried about her mental state. She should have thought about that before forging my signature. She didn't. He stopped himself. Took a breath. Look, I'll be honest with you. The documents were my idea. Clarice was worried about your future, about what would happen if something happened to you, and I suggested we get everything organized. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I made mistakes. But Clarice loves you. This is tearing her apart. She has a funny way of showing love. If you don't drop this, if we go to trial, everything comes out. My career ends. Clarice's reputation is destroyed. Is that what you want? To ruin your own daughter's life? There it was. The real message. Not an apology. A threat wrapped in concern. Martin, if Clarice's life is ruined, it's because of what she did. Not because I reported it. His expression changed. The fake concern dropped away, replaced by something cold. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand seeing her daughter succeed. That's what everyone will think when this is over. Get off my property. We're going to win the guardianship petition. We have doctors, witnesses, evidence of your decline. And when we win, when I'm managing your money and making your medical decisions, you'll wish you'd taken this deal. I said get off my property. He smiled then, the same smile he'd worn while carving turkey on Christmas. See you in court, Serafina. After he left, I sat down and shook for 20 minutes. Then I called Boone and played him the recording. He just threatened you on tape, Boone said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. This is gold. They're panicking, making mistakes. The hearing is going to go very differently than they expect. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Martin's cold smile, heard Clarice's threat about remembering my choice. They were going to fight dirty. But so was I. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold. I dressed carefully, professional but not too formal. Boone said to look like myself, not like someone pretending to be competent. Just someone who was. When I walked into the courtroom, Clarice and Martin were already there with their lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a navy suit. Clarice wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge was an older man with reading glasses perched on his nose. He reviewed the petition, then Dr. Price's report, then looked up at all of us with an expression I couldn't read. This is an unusual case, he said. Let's begin. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No jury, no crowd, just a judge behind his bench and 2 tables facing him, one for us, one for them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the building, a phone rang and rang. Clarice sat perfectly still at her table, hands folded, playing the role of concerned daughter. Martin beside her, equally composed. Their lawyer shuffled papers with practiced efficiency. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. We're here regarding a petition for guardianship of Serafina Durrell, filed by Clarice Monroe. However, I've also received responsive pleadings alleging fraud and forgery. This complicates matters significantly. He looked at both tables. Miss Chun, you're representing the petitioners? Their lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. Clarice Monroe and Martin Monroe, out of love and concern for Mrs. Durrell's well-being. And Mr. Boone, you're representing Mrs. Durrell? Boone stood, calm and steady. Yes, Your Honor. And we're prepared to show that this petition is not about concern. It's about covering up financial crimes. Ms. Chen's jaw tightened. Your Honor, that's inflammatory and completely. I've read the filings from both sides, Judge Morrison interrupted. And frankly, they paint very different pictures. So here's what we're going to do. Ms. Chen, you'll present your case for why Mrs. Durrell needs a guardian. Mr. Boone, you'll respond. And then I'm going to ask Mrs. Durrell some questions myself. Fair enough. Both lawyers nodded. Miss Chun started by calling a neighbor who claimed I'd seemed confused at the grocery store last month, asking for help finding items I'd bought for years. Then one of Martin's colleagues who said I'd called their office repeatedly asking for Martin, seeming disoriented about whether we'd talked before. Every testimony felt like being slowly buried under lies. Then Clarice took the stand. She looked smaller up there, vulnerable in a way I knew was calculated. Miss Chun led her through a series of questions about my supposed decline. Memory lapses. Confusion about dates. Trouble managing bills. And when did you first become concerned about your mother's capacity? Miss Chun asked. About 6 months ago. Clarice's voice was soft, sad. She called me 3 times in one day asking the same question. She didn't remember we'd already talked. That's when I knew we needed to start planning for her care. Lies. I'd called her once that day. Once. Did you try to discuss these concerns with her? Many times. But she became defensive, angry. She accused us of trying to control her. That's when Martin suggested we consult a lawyer about protecting her assets before she made a terrible financial mistake. And the documents Mrs. Durrell claims are forged? She signed them willingly. She was tired that evening and maybe doesn't remember, but I watched her sign every page. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her myself. Boone stood for cross-examination. Ms. Monroe, you stated your mother signed these documents willingly. Do you recall the date? November 18th. At our house, after dinner. And where exactly did this signing take place? In Martin's office. We have a home office. Boone pulled out a paper. According to your credit card statements, which we subpoenaed, you and your husband were in Chicago on November 18th. A conference for Martin's firm. You didn't return until November 20th. Clarice's face went pale. I must have the date wrong. Must you? Because you were quite specific a moment ago. It was November 20th then, when we got back. Except your mother's cell phone records show she wasn't at your house on November 20th. In fact, she wasn't at your house at all that entire week. The courtroom went very quiet. Miss Chun tried to recover. Your Honor, these are minor discrepancies in dates. They're lies, Boone said flatly. And we can prove it. Dr. Helena Price, our forensic document examiner, is here to testify about those signatures. If you've ever watched someone's lies unravel in real time, you know what I saw in Clarice's face then. Pure panic. Dr. Price took the stand. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She explained her credentials. 20 years analyzing documents, testimony in over 200 cases, publications in forensic journals. Then she explained what she'd found. The signatures on these documents exhibit multiple indicators of forgery. First, the ink composition doesn't match other verified samples from the same alleged time period. Second, microscopic analysis shows hesitation marks consistent with someone copying rather than naturally signing. Third, the pressure patterns are wrong. Forgers typically apply more pressure when tracing. And finally, she pulled out a photograph. We have these. The practice signatures. Projected on a screen for everyone to see. Too shaky. Needs more pressure. Redo the capital D. These drafts were found hidden in Mrs. Durrell's own home. They show clear intent to forge her signature, including self-critique notes on technique. In my professional opinion, the signatures on the estate documents are forgeries, and these practice sheets prove premeditation. Judge Morrison leaned forward, studying the screen. Then he looked at Clarice and Martin. Do either of you recognize this handwriting in the margin notes? Silence. Ms. Monroe. Clarice was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of someone caught. I can't. Mr. Monroe? Martin's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. I'd like to consult with our attorney. I bet you would. Judge Morrison sat back. Mr. Boone, do you have anything else? Just one more piece of evidence, Your Honor. Boone played the recording from my phone. Martin's voice filled the courtroom. When I'm managing your money and making your medical decisions, you'll wish you'd taken this deal. When it ended, Judge Morrison removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. This is one of the more disturbing cases I've seen in 30 years on the bench. Ms. Chun, unless you have something extraordinary to present, I'm denying this petition immediately. Ms. Chun looked at her clients, then back at the judge. No, Your Honor. Nothing further. Then here's my ruling. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of potential criminal fraud. The injunction on Mrs. Durrell's assets remains in place, but control returns fully to her. And I'm issuing a restraining order. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe are to have no contact with Mrs. Durrell pending resolution of any criminal proceedings. He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. I sat there, unable to move. It was over. We'd won. Beside me, Boone gathered his papers. You did good, he said quietly. Real good. Across the room, Clarice was sobbing into Martin's shoulder. He stared straight ahead, his face carved from stone. Miss Chun was whispering urgently to them both, probably already planning their defense for what came next. As I stood to leave, Clarice looked up. Our eyes met across that courtroom, and for just a second, I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who'd held my hand crossing streets. Who'd climbed into my lap when thunderstorms scared her. Who'd called me the best mama in the world. Then she looked away, and that little girl was gone. Outside, the gray morning had turned into afternoon sun. Boone walked me to my car. What happens now? I asked. Now? The DA decides whether to press charges. Could be fraud, could be attempted theft, could be both. That's out of our hands. But your assets are safe. Your house is yours. Everything's back under your control. And Clarice. He was quiet for a moment. That's harder. Legally, she's in serious trouble. Personally. He shook his head. That's something only you can figure out. Do you think some betrayals can ever be forgiven? Or are there lines that, once crossed, can't be uncrossed? Tell me what you think in the comments. I drove home alone, the radio off, just the sound of my breathing and the engine. When I pulled into my driveway, my house, my property that nobody could take anymore, I sat in the car for a long time. That night, the phone rang. Not Clarice. Not Martin. A blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Durrell? This is Detective Sarah Chan with the District Attorney's Office. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you about the case. We're considering filing criminal charges against Clarice and Martin Monroe. Criminal charges. My daughter could go to jail. I'll call you back, I said. I need some time. Of course. But Mrs. Durrell? I've read the case file. What they did to you was serious. They deserve to face consequences. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where this had all started on Christmas night, and tried to figure out how I felt. Relief, yes. Vindication, absolutely. But underneath that, grief. Deep, aching grief for the relationship I'd thought I had, for the daughter I'd thought I'd raised, for the family I'd thought we were. The next morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my front door. No postage, hand-delivered. Inside was a single piece of paper with 2 words in handwriting I recognized. I'm sorry. Nothing else. No explanation, no excuses. Just those 2 words in Clarice's handwriting. I held that paper for a long time, trying to decide if it changed anything. It didn't. The settlement negotiations started 3 weeks after the hearing. Not because I asked for them, I was ready to let the DA file charges and let the courts handle it. But Martin's lawyer reached out to Boone with an offer. They'd give up all claims to my assets. Martin would resign from his law firm. They'd move out of state. In exchange, I'd ask the DA not to prosecute. It's up to you, Boone said when he called to tell me. You've already won the important part. Your assets are protected, the guardianship was denied, they're legally barred from contacting you. Criminal charges would just mean months more of court dates and testimony. What do you think I should do? I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. That evening, I sat in my backyard with a cup of tea I didn't drink, watching the sun set behind the trees Robert and I had planted 20 years ago. The same trees that would still be here long after all this was over, after I was gone, after everyone involved in this mess was just a memory. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Peace? I thought about Clarice as a little girl, how she'd bring me dandelions from the yard like they were the most precious flowers in the world. How she'd practiced her spelling words with me every night, sitting at the kitchen table with her tongue between her teeth in concentration. How proud she'd been at her college graduation, how Robert had cried watching her walk across that stage. When had it all gone wrong? Or had she always been capable of this and I'd just refused to see it? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But please. Clarice had found a way around the restraining order. Through someone else's phone probably. Breaking the rules again, even now. I blocked the number. The next morning, I called Boone. Tell them I'll accept the settlement. But with conditions. What conditions? They withdraw all claims immediately. Martin doesn't just resign. He surrenders his law license. They move at least 3 states away. And they pay back the $1,500 they stole, with interest. That's harsh. They tried to erase me. This is mercy. Boone was quiet for a moment. I'll draw up the paperwork. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. I never had to see them again. Everything was handled through lawyers and signed documents. Appropriate, given how this whole thing started. The irony wasn't lost on me. Martin's resignation from his firm made a small splash in legal circles. Personal reasons was the official line, but enough people knew enough pieces of the truth that his reputation was finished anyway. They'd have to start over somewhere else, probably using Clarice's maiden name. The $1,500 showed up in my account with an extra $200 in interest. I donated all of it to a local organization that helped seniors with legal issues. Let some good come from the ugliness. One afternoon in late spring, Camille, the retired paralegal who'd helped start this whole thing, stopped by with homemade cookies. We sat on my porch drinking lemonade and watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes in the street. How are you doing? She asked. Really doing? Some days are better than others. I keep expecting Clarice to call, even though I know she won't. The restraining order expires in 6 months, but I don't think she'll reach out even then. Would you want her to? I thought about that. I don't know. Part of me wants to believe she's sorry, that the woman who wrote that apology note was real. But another part knows that even if she is sorry, it doesn't change what she did. Or who she became. You can miss someone and still know they're not good for you, Camille said. That's one of life's harder lessons. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Camille pulled an envelope from her purse. I brought you something. It's information about a support group for people who've experienced financial abuse from family members. I thought you might want to go. Or not. No pressure. I took the envelope. Thank you. For everything. If you hadn't tapped my shoulder that day in the library, you'd have figured it out anyway. You're tougher than you think. After she left, I opened the envelope. The support group met Thursday evenings at a church downtown. I'd never been much for group therapy or sharing feelings with strangers. But maybe it was time to try new things. Maybe that's what recovery looked like. Not going back to who I was before, but becoming someone new. That night, I had a dream about Robert. We were in our backyard, the one in this house, but it looked like it did when we first moved in 30 years ago. Young trees, grass that needed work, a clothesline we'd eventually replace with a dryer. You did good, he said. In the dream, this felt like a perfectly normal conversation. Standing up for yourself. I'm proud of you. I lost our daughter. No. She lost herself. That's not on you. I woke up with tears on my face, but feeling lighter somehow. Like I'd gotten permission I didn't know I needed. The restraining order meant I couldn't contact Clarice, but it didn't stop me from thinking about her. I wondered if she and Martin were still together, or if the stress of everything had broken them. I wondered if she'd found work, if they'd managed to rebuild somewhere else. I wondered if she ever thought about me. Mostly, I wondered if she understood what she'd done. Not just the forgery or the theft, but the deeper betrayal. The way she'd looked at me that Christmas night and seen not a mother, but an asset. A problem to be managed. An obstacle between her and money. Could someone come back from becoming that person? I didn't know. 3 months after the settlement, I got a letter. Not from Clarice, from her lawyer, technically respecting the restraining order. It contained a check for $50,000 and a single typed sentence, additional restitution beyond settlement terms. No explanation. No note from Clarice herself. Just money. I stared at that check for a long time. It was more than they'd tried to steal, more than any documented loss. Was it guilt money? An attempt to buy forgiveness? Or just a way to clear their conscience before starting fresh somewhere else? I called Boone. What do I do with this? It's yours. You can keep it, donate it, burn it. Your choice. I thought about what that money represented. All the planning, all the greed, all the betrayal. Blood money, in a way. I deposited the check and immediately donated the entire amount to 3 organizations. An elder law clinic, a financial abuse hotline, and a scholarship fund for students studying social work. Let it do some good in the world. Let it help people who were facing what I'd faced. When I told Camille, she hugged me. You turned poison into medicine. That's power. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's what survival looked like. Taking what tried to destroy you and transforming it into something that helped others. The support group turned out to be exactly what I needed. 8 people, all ages, all with similar stories of family members who'd stolen or manipulated or forged. We met every Thursday evening, sharing our experiences without judgment. I learned I wasn't alone. That this happened to thousands of people every year. That shame was part of the weapon they used against us, making us feel stupid for being betrayed by people we loved. But we weren't stupid. We were human. And trust wasn't a weakness, even when it was exploited. One Thursday, a woman named Patricia told her story. Her son had drained her retirement account while pretending to help her invest it. She'd only found out when she tried to withdraw money for surgery and discovered the account was empty. The hardest part, she said, is that I still love him. Even after everything. Is that crazy? No, I said. It's not crazy. It's being a parent. We don't stop loving them just because they hurt us. We just have to love them from a distance now, where they can't hurt us anymore. Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. Around the circle, others were nodding too. We all understood that particular pain, the grief that comes not from death, but from discovering someone you loved was never who you thought they were. After the meeting, I drove home through streets I'd known for decades. Same houses, same trees, same stop signs. Everything looked the same as it had before Christmas. But I wasn't the same person who'd lived here back then. That person had been lonely, yes. Afraid of growing old alone. But she'd also been trusting in a way that left her vulnerable. She'd handed over pieces of herself without question because family was supposed to be safe. Now I knew better. Trust had to be earned, even from family. Especially from family. The restraining order expired on a Tuesday in October. I marked the date on my calendar, then spent the day gardening. Pulling weeds, planting bulbs for spring, turning over soil that had been neglected too long. My phone didn't ring. No knock came at the door. Clarice stayed away, wherever she was now. Maybe that was for the best. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset and thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. I'd lost my daughter, or at least the version of her I'd believed existed. Lost the fantasy of family that I'd been clinging to. But I'd gained something too. Self-respect. The knowledge that I could fight for myself. A community of people who understood. And most importantly, I'd gained back myself. The person I'd almost let them erase. My phone buzzed. An email from Boone. Thought you'd want to know. Martin Monroe's law license was permanently revoked today. Appeals exhausted. It's officially over. I read the message twice, then set my phone down. It was over. Really, truly over. Should I have felt satisfaction? Victory? Instead, I just felt tired. And maybe a little sad for everyone involved. For me, for the life I'd imagined, and yes, even for Clarice, who destroyed her own life chasing money that wouldn't have made her happy anyway. Have you ever won something but felt empty afterward? Sometimes justice doesn't feel like we expect it to. Drop your thoughts below. That night, I pulled out the notebook where I'd documented everything. Pages and pages of evidence, dates, details. The paper trail that had saved me. On the last page, I wrote one final entry. October 15th, restraining order expired today. She didn't call. I didn't expect her to. The case is closed. Martin's license is gone. They're living somewhere far from here, starting over with nothing but the weight of what they did. And I'm still here. Still standing. Still in my home. Still myself. They tried to write me out of my own story. But I'm still here. And this time, the ink is mine. I closed the notebook and put it in a drawer. Not to forget, I'd never forget, but because I didn't need to keep rereading it. The story was over. This chapter was closed. Time to write a new one. 6 months after the restraining order expired, I was planting tomatoes in my backyard when my neighbor called over the fence. Serafina, there's someone at your front door. Been knocking for a few minutes. My stomach dropped. But when I walked around to the front of the house, it wasn't Clarice standing on my porch. It was a young woman, maybe 30, holding a briefcase. Mrs. Durrell? I'm Jennifer Park from the Elder Law Coalition. We received your donation last year, and I was hoping to speak with you about possibly sharing your story. My story. About what happened to you. We're putting together a public awareness campaign about financial elder abuse, and your case illustrates perfectly how it can happen to anyone. How families can exploit trust. We'd like to feature your experience, anonymously if you prefer, to help educate others. I invited her in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd written all those notebook entries, and talked for 2 hours. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. Your case had several elements that make it particularly instructive, she said. The forgery practice sheets, the DNR order, the attempted guardianship. These are tactics abusers use, but people don't know to look for them until it's too late. So how do we stop it? Education. Warning signs. Encouraging people to keep copies of important documents, to question unusual requests, to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. She looked at me intently. Would you be willing to speak publicly? Not media, nothing like that. But maybe at senior centers, community groups. Tell your story in your own words. I thought about Patricia from the support group, crying as she admitted she still loved her son. About all the others who'd sat in that circle, carrying shame that wasn't theirs to carry. About how alone I'd felt before I knew this was a pattern, not a personal failure. Yes, I said. I'll speak. The first talk I gave was at a senior center 3 towns over. 30 people in folding chairs, most of them older than me, all of them nervous about why they'd come to hear about financial abuse. I stood at the front of that room and told my story. Not with shame, not with anger. Just with honesty. I told them about Christmas dinner and forged signatures and practice sheets hidden in my own house. About feeling crazy and alone. About fighting back. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then an elderly man in the back raised his hand. My son keeps asking me to add him to my bank account. Says it's just for convenience, in case something happens. But something in my gut says no. After hearing your story, I know I'm right to trust that feeling. A woman in the front row spoke up. My daughter-in-law wants me to update my will. She's very insistent about it. She even recommended a lawyer, her friend. I was going to do it just to keep the peace, but now. Now you know to get your own lawyer, I said. Someone who represents only you. And never sign anything you haven't read completely. Never sign anything just because family says to trust them. The questions kept coming. The room came alive with people sharing their own concerns, their own suspicions, their own stories of narrowly avoiding what happened to me. Or worse, stories of not avoiding it. Of losing everything because they trusted the wrong person. After the talk, a line formed. Person after person wanting to thank me, to tell me their story, to ask advice. I stayed for 2 hours past the scheduled end time, talking to everyone who needed to be heard. That night, driving home, I felt something I hadn't expected. Purpose. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like I had a reason to get up in the morning beyond just existing. I started speaking regularly. Senior centers, church groups, community colleges. The Elder Law Coalition connected me with other organizations. My calendar filled up with dates and locations. Each talk was different, each audience had different questions, but the core message stayed the same: trust your instincts. Protect your documents. Ask questions. Get your own lawyer. Don't sign anything under pressure. And know that if it happens to you, it's not your fault. You're not stupid. You're not alone. One evening after a talk at a library, a woman approached me. She was younger than my usual audience, maybe 45. Mrs. Durrell, thank you for sharing your story. I came tonight because of my mother. She's 78 and my brother has been pressuring her to sell her house and move in with him. He says it's for her safety, but I think he wants the money from the house sale. Your story gave me the courage to speak up. I'm going to talk to her tomorrow, help her understand what to look for. Good, I said. Sometimes the best protection is just one person paying attention. Be that person for your mother. She hugged me, and I felt her tears on my shoulder. You probably saved her from what happened to you. Thank you. After she left, I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. Not sad tears. Something else. Relief maybe, or redemption. The pain I'd gone through wasn't pointless. It was teaching me how to help others avoid the same fate. Around this time, I received a letter forwarded through Boone's office. The return address was from Nevada, far enough away to feel safe, I supposed. The handwriting on the envelope was Clarissa's. I held it for 3 days before opening it. Inside was a letter, 5 pages handwritten on plain paper. No expensive stationery this time. Just drugstore notebook paper and a pen. Dear Mama, I know I have no right to write to you. The restraining order is expired, but I've respected your silence because I know I deserve it. But there are things I need to say, even if you never respond. Even if you throw this away without reading it. I'm sorry doesn't come close to covering what I did to you. There's no word big enough for the betrayal I committed. I can explain it. Martin's firm was failing, we were drowning in debt, we'd made terrible investments, but explanations aren't excuses. You were my mother and I tried to steal your life. The woman who did that feels like someone else now. Someone I don't recognize. I've spent every day since the hearing asking myself how I became her. When did money matter more than you? When did I start seeing you as an obstacle instead of my mother? I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that losing you has destroyed me in ways that losing the house and Martin's career never could. Martin and I are divorced now. Turns out when the money's gone, there's nothing left between people who only valued each other for what they could get. I'm working as a waitress in Reno. Starting over at 52 with nothing. And you know what? I deserve this. Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of starting from zero. It's justice. But Mama, please know this, you were right to fight back. Right to expose us. Right to protect yourself. I'm glad you did. Because if you hadn't, I might have kept going down that path until I couldn't find my way back at all. I hope you're well. I hope you've found peace. I hope someday you can think of me without pain. I love you. I always loved you, even when I acted like I didn't. I'm so sorry I forgot how to show it. Clarice. I read that letter 5 times. Each time, I cried differently. First from anger. How dare she try to make me feel sorry for her? Then from sadness for what we'd lost. Then from something more complicated that didn't have a name. She was sorry. I believed that. But sorry didn't undo anything. Sorry didn't give back the months of fear and confusion. Sorry didn't erase the image of my forged signature with notes about making it shakier. I put the letter in a drawer with my notebook. Not to keep rereading, just to have. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe I wouldn't. For now, it was enough to know she was alive and struggling and facing consequences. That was all I could handle. The speaking engagements continued. I became something I never expected, an advocate, an educator, a voice for people who'd been silenced by shame. The Elder Law Coalition asked me to serve on their advisory board. I said yes. 1 year after the settlement, I spoke at a conference for social workers and elder care professionals. 500 people in the audience. The biggest crowd I'd ever addressed. I stood at that podium and looked out at all those faces, and for a moment, I was back in Clarissa's kitchen on Christmas night, shaking and alone and terrified. Then I remembered, I wasn't that person anymore. I'd fought. I'd won. And now I was using what happened to help others. My name is Serafina Durrell, I began. And I'm here to tell you about the night my daughter tried to erase me from my own life. The room was completely silent as I spoke. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. But more meaningful than applause were the people who approached me afterward. Social workers who'd suspected abuse in their clients' families but hadn't known how to prove it, lawyers who wanted resources for similar cases, and elderly people who'd come to the conference looking for exactly what I'd given them, hope. That evening, back in my hotel room, I called Camille. How'd it go? She asked. I think I finally understand something. They tried to write me out of my own story. But by fighting back, by surviving, by speaking up, I wrote myself back in. Bigger and louder than before. That's not survival, Camille said softly. That's victory. Maybe she was right. I came home to my house, still my house, always my house, and walked through the rooms Robert and I had filled with decades of memories. The places Clarice had played as a child. The kitchen where this nightmare had started. But it wasn't a house of fear anymore. It was mine again. Fully, completely, undeniably mine. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and pulled out a fresh notebook. Not for evidence this time. Just for writing. I'd been thinking about turning my experience into a book. A practical guide for seniors about protecting themselves from financial abuse. Something that could help people beyond the talks I could give in person. On the first page, I wrote, Chapter 1, The Night Everything Changed. Then I stopped and crossed it out. That wasn't the right beginning. I started again, Chapter 1, The Night I Fought Back. Better. Much better. Outside, the sun was setting, painting my backyard in gold and orange light. The tomatoes I'd planted were growing strong. The trees Robert and I had planted decades ago provided shade and strength. Everything I'd almost lost was still here. And so was I. They tried to write me out of my own life. They forged my signature, stole my money, planned my future without me in it. They bet on me being too old, too tired, too trusting to fight back. They were wrong. I'm Serafina Durrell. I'm 64 years old. I live in the house I've owned for 33 years. I speak at conferences and senior centers. I serve on an advisory board. I'm writing a book. I have friends and purpose and plans for the future. They tried to erase me. Instead, they gave me a reason to be louder, stronger, more visible than I'd ever been before. And this time, the ink is mine. If this story moved you, I need you to do something for me. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. A parent, a grandparent, a friend. Financial elder abuse happens to $20 billion worth of victims every year, and most of them suffer in silence because they're ashamed. Break that silence. Share this story. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories like this one. Stories of people who refused to be victims, who fought back, who reclaimed their lives. Next time, I'm going to tell you about a young man who invited his mother to his graduation just to embarrass her in front of everyone. But she pulled up in a Rolls-Royce, and what happened next shocked the entire auditorium. He literally collapsed. You don't want to miss it. Turn on your notifications right now. Drop a comment telling me what part of Serafina's story hit you hardest. And remember, you're never too old, too tired, or too alone to stand up for yourself. The ink is yours. Use it.